Hello everyone, welcome back. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I've got my November, December books that I've read. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to sit down and film a books that I read video in November, so I decided to go ahead and just combine them so that when I come back in early 2018 and share with you all my top books, you will at least heard a little bit about what I read in the months of November and December. So why don't we just jump right in and talk about the books that I read, because I have several this time around in the mainstream edition. The first book that I ended up reading was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I hope I said that right. But anyways, this book centers around a young girl. Her name is Marie-Laure, and she is blind, and her father works for the museum in Paris, and he is training her, trying to teach her basically how to survive as a blind person. And then it also follows a young boy. His name is Warner, and he is an orphan, and he is being raised in an orphanage by an orphanage with his little sister. Warner is an extremely gifted child when it comes to technology, and I'm talking about like radio technology. He, as a young child, him and his sister Judah end up listening to a science radio program that they find on a radio that he was able to repair. He had found it in the trash and he was able to repair it and make it work. And as time goes on, he starts to develop those skills to the level where the Nazi army, he goes to school and gets trained, and he joins the Nazi army as a repairman. At this time, Marie-Laure has her father, his name is Daniel. He works for the Museum of Natural History in Paris. And so, World War II hits, and the curator at the Natural History Museum finds himself in a spot where he has to hide a particular jewel. It's a diamond, and it's called the Sea of Flames. And so he creates 3 different stories to where this jewel could possibly be hidden. It supposedly had special powers, this jewel. So anyways, Marie-Laure ends up having to go stay with her uncle at the seaside and her father. In that time frame, her father continues to try to teach her how to best navigate with her blindness, unfortunately. You know, it just wasn't very easy. I don't want to share too much about the story because as it is, I think I might have, you know, I'm giving you just enough to maybe heighten your interest about the book. I thought the book was very well written. I thought the story kind of flowed. I liked the way that these 2 children were brought together as young adults. My heart really went out to Warner, as he is an orphan, and he, you know, was just so bright, just so very bright. And he didn't have many options other than to join the Nazi army. And so my heart went out to him. Marie-Laure, her blindness and her desire to be independent, and her father's desire to teach her to be independent. Her uncle, I really did like her uncle that, you know, weaves into the story later on. It was just a really good book. World War II historical fiction typically isn't my jam or my forte, right? But this book really was good, and I do recommend it. Like, if I were to give it stars, I would say it's a 4. I think that the storytelling was very good. I think that the story in itself was good. I think that the characters were very relatable, and I did enjoy how the story finished. Is it one of my best books of the year? I don't know. You'll have to stay tuned to find out, but it was a good book. The next book I read was Island Beneath the Sea by Isabelle Allende. I am Spanish, as you guys know, and I have heard of Isabelle Allende throughout my life. Different books have come out, and I've never really sat down and read any of her books. And so recently I was in a place where I was like, I don't know what to read. And so I decided to look up one of her books, and I checked it out, and this is the one I happen to have chosen. This book is about a young girl, Tete, or Sarete, and she is a slave in the Isle of Saint-Domingue, which I believe is modern day Haiti or Santo Domingo in the Caribbean. This story follows Tete as she's sold to Volmoraine. He is a French aristocrat that has a sugarcane farm in Haiti. Anyways, he comes to the island to try to build his family's fortune, which is based on sugar, from the production of sugar in Haiti. And then the story follows through as Tete is in Balmoral move into Louisiana, New Orleans. And as I read this novel, I really found myself cheering for Tay-Tay, and I just loved her spirit. I thought she was such a strong woman. Actually, my heart went out to Tay-Tay, but she was probably the only character that I had identified with at all in the book. So this book, I'm not really sure that I happen to have chosen the right book, the first book to read for the first time for Isabelle Allende. I thought it was a little bit slow. I thought that Tay-Tay herself was quite an interesting character. It was the things around her that I just found myself having a really hard time relating to. So anyways, I think that pretty much lets you know how I felt about the book, and hopefully gives you an idea as to whether or not it's something that you might like to pick up. Sorry about that, guys. My battery died. So I'm going to quickly try to run through the last few books that I have on my list, and one of them is Animal Farm. This is a reread for me, but for when I read it when I was like in 9th or 10th grade. Isn't that when we read it here? Anyways, it's a satirical book. It basically deals with farm animals that uprise and take over a farm and kill the farmer and decide that they can run the farm better than the farmer ever did. And well, let's just talk about that. You know, I don't know if they did a better job. I think it's a good book. I think it's a book that everyone should read. I think it's a book that really, if we read it at this time in our history, it might really deal with some of the issues that we're dealing with. But, you know, I thought it was a great book. I think it's definitely a classic for a reason, and I highly recommend it. So moving on, because that one is just something that I wanted to go back. It was a quick read. You know, it's a small book, and I picked it up because it was just something that I could read really quickly. Now, I'll tell you, I had the biggest drought. My reading, I was going through a funk. I really did. At the end of November, beginning of December, I was just, you know, the books I was reading, some of them just, I don't know, they just weren't as good as I expected them to be. And let's just talk about one of them, and it's A Column of Fire by Ken Follet, and it's the third book in the King's Bridge sequels. Pillars of the Earth is the first book in this trilogy, and it's probably one of my favorite books of all time. It's one of the books that I have up there because it's one of those books that I really, really did enjoy. Let me tell y'all something. It's an epic book. It's huge. It's a big fat book, and I really love that book. I love the character Tom Belger, Jack. I mean, I just really love that book. The second book I thought was okay. I enjoyed it. Wasn't my favorite, wasn't my least favorite, but I did enjoy it, and so it was good. But this third one, A Column of Fire, I think it's an okay book. I think the main problem with it is that it's really not in Kingsbridge. Honestly, it's much more of a historical book. It's during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. It's also Mary, Queen of Scots is in this book, her son, King James, and also a small portion of when Queen Mary was prior to Queen Elizabeth. And so that's the time period, which is, I think, isn't that like in the 1500s? That's the time period you're talking about. And there's the main character, his name is Ned, and there's a love interest. His love interest is Marjorie, and Marjorie is from a family that's very ambitious, and they marry her off to the local earl. Well, you know, Ned is just this brilliant young man. He goes on to become an assistant for Queen Elizabeth, and you know, the story goes from there. And then it ties it in with the French side, and on the French side there's, I think, what they were considering the villain. His name is Pierre, and he is just this man who is just never happy with who he is, and he is going to become more. Let's put it that way. And he eventually, he's basically a fraud. But this book deals with the conflict of the Protestants and the Catholics. This book deals with the conflict between the French and the Spanish and the English. This book dealt with the, you know, the monarchs and how they became the monarchs, and all the people that are constantly striving to get power. Again, my main issue with the book is that it's not in Kingsbridge, and Kingsbridge is part of the reason I love the story. Second, there were words in the book, like for example, Ken Follet used the word picture quite often when he was referring to Ned. And at one point Sophie sees a picture of Marjorie, and I'm not going to talk about who Sophie and Marjorie was the love interest for Ned, and Sophie is a character from Sylvie. Why did I call her Sophie? Sylvie. Sylvie was a character in France, and she sees a picture of Marjorie, and I thought to myself, it kind of hit me, I was like, there were no pictures back then. What the heck? Maybe a portrait, a painting, but the word picture? I was like, that just doesn't sound right. So there were things in the book that just weren't historically correct. And granted, I can, very much overlook those things if I have to. But, I just, of the three, I would say it's my least favorite of the books. I did like Ned. I thought he was a really nice guy. But I do think, but I don't think it was the best Ken Follett book I've ever read. So those are my 2 cents on that book. I also read the book Everything, Everything by Nicola Yoon. And I thought this book was okay. And I'll tell you why. This book made me mad. And I happen to like Nicola Yoon, so I do enjoy her writing style. However, I have to tell you something. This book made me mad. Maybe because I'm the mother of a young woman. Maybe because I've dealt with an illness since I was young. I don't know. This book made me angry. The main character in the book, her name is Maddie. She suffers from a condition that basically she's allergic to the world. So she is, in essence, a bubble girl. She cannot leave her home and nobody can come in. So basically her contact with the world is limited to what she does on the World Wide Web, her nurse, and her mother, who is a doctor. Part of the history is that her mother lost her husband and her son, I believe, in a car accident. So Maddie becomes her whole world. As the book progresses, a young man, his name is Ollie, moves in next door. He comes from a very dysfunctional family, and he sees Maddie from a window, and they slowly start up a relationship on the internet, basically DMing each other or, sending each other messages, right? And that part of the story for me was very good. It was a coming of age story. It brought about their Maddie starting to feel things that she'd never felt before, because she just really had never had any contact with any other young people in her whole life. And so I thought that part of the story was really, really good. However, I was so mad at the end of that book. I'm going to tell you right now, it was not my favorite. I don't want to say anything bad about it, because I really do think it had to do something as a mom. The mother in this book, I just couldn't relate to her. And then later, as having been a young person with a medical condition, I also couldn't relate with Maddie and the way that she eventually makes some choices in her life. I had a really hard time with the book. I don't think it's a bad book in any way, shape, or form. I think it was just not a book for me. So then after I read Everything, Everything, I was like, I just need to read something that will, get my reading back up, because guys, at this point I was like, I'm not finding a book that I'm absolutely, falling in love with. And so I ended up going back to Harry Potter, and I read The Goblet of Fire. So I ended up picking up Harry Potter and The Goblet of Fire. I just needed to read something I knew I was going to love. Guys, that's the reason why. And, I don't have very much to say other than that's probably historically has been my favorite Harry Potter book. You guys know that I wanted to go back and kind of revisit them all from beginning to end. I love it. I love Harry Potter, so I don't have anything bad to say about that book, and I highly recommend if you are a parent and you want to read a book with your kid or listen to it on a CD. I did that with my daughter, actually, when she was a young girl. I would put the CDs in the car as I would go drive to Car Rider Line, we would listen to Harry Potter, so that was one of those things that we did together. So I enjoyed it. It was a great book, and then I picked up the next one. And the next one I read, I actually did enjoy, and it was The Running Man by Stephen King, but it was he was writing under another name. But it's one of those books that he wrote under the name of Richard Bachman. I saw that Emily Fox had read this book and that she liked it. And like I told you guys, I was in a reading funk, and I really do enjoy a lot of the books that she seems to enjoy. We seem to have very similar taste in books. And so I was like, let me pick that book up. And so I did. I liked it. It was a small book, and it was a quick read. Basically, The Running Man is a competition, kind of like the Hunger Games. The book is in America in 2025. And in essence, what it is, it's a TV show that uses people, you know, the throwaways of society, to compete in order to get things that they might need. You know, out of their desperation, they agree to be part of this particular competition. Well, the competition, if it's really unlikely that anyone can ever win, but the further you make it along in the competition, your family will get a certain amount of money per episode that you're able to stay alive. And so Ben Richards, he's the main character, he is desperate to help out his family because his daughter is suffering and he's trying to get her the help that she needs. And so he joins the Running Man. Well, he is the divergent, for lack of a better word, because I really, as I was reading it, I thought, gosh, this book is like almost the combination of Divergent and Hunger Games together, but in an adult book. It's a really good book. I really did enjoy it. It kept me wanting more. I was invested. I wanted Ben Richards to win. In fact, it makes me want to maybe go back and read several others of his Richard Bachman books. I never read any of those. I read quite a few Stephen King books as a young woman, just simply because at that time that was what was in style. I read Pet Sematary. I read Christine. I read Carey, My Name. I read The Shining. I read several of his books as I was growing up, and they were all horror books, and that's just not the kind of books that I enjoy at this time in my life. But I do enjoy his writing, and this particular book was very, very good, and I do recommend it. If I were to give it stars, I would say I would give it a 4.5. I don't think it's a 5 because there were certain things in it that kind of, that just didn't meet my book perfection goals, but it was a good book. It was entertaining and it was quick. So guys, those are the books that I read in the month of November and December. I hope these mini reviews were helpful. I'm going to try to put together a list of the top books that I read in 2017. I'm going to try to, again, always try to do the mainstream and my Christian picks. So look forward to those videos. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching, and I hope that you'll come back and become part of my family here. Y'all have a great day. Happy New Year's, you guys, and you guys be blessed. Bye.